Of course, my document disappeared. Cool. Well, welcome to the second episode of e-commerce office hours. Now, the purpose of these calls is to talk about, to answer questions on e-commerce. And we want to talk about, one is Google technologies, but also general web technologies. We're going to take it a little bit by week. I'm going to be inviting different Googlers along to different weeks. So if there's particular topics you'd like covered in a future week, Cheney, do you want to introduce yourself again very briefly, Cheney?
Sure. Nice to be everyone. My name is Cheney. I have been in Google for 6 years as a technical consultant, helping partners across e-commerce, retail, travel, kind of build high-quality web experiences.
Cool. And my name's Alan Kent. I work with the developer relations team. And so we work with platforms and agencies trying to promote best practices for e-commerce on the web. So what we wanted to do in these sessions is answer any questions people have got. The audience is for developers. That's the intent. Frankly, we'll answer any questions we can, but we're going to be focusing on different topics for each week. The topic for this week is actually just to talk about the coverage of the range of Google products, get out there and share what sort of the breadth is. But there were a couple of questions that came up last week that I just wanted to follow up on. One was the availability of status codes came up for Google Shopping, especially with COVID. Are there more statuses that could be there to sort of say, my store is, this product is still available, but it's only available online because our store has got not allowed people in, but you can pick up from curbside. There's just a lot more statuses people want. So I actually fed that back to the Google Shopping team. They are doing some work there, but I'm not allowed to share about timelines or roadmaps and so forth, but they certainly recognized it as a good point. Another just a housekeeping issue from last week, I shared the live stream link. It turns out you can only access it if you're a Googler. Well, I should have known that before I tried it. So no live stream this week, and I'm not planning to do it for the future ones either. We are planning to put the video up on YouTube. With all the increased capacity, I'm wondering if there might be some more restrictions there, because I was having trouble actually uploading the episode from last week. And so I'm going to actually chop it into multiple parts to try and upload it one part at a time. So I actually did try to get last week's episode up on YouTube. What that was on was focused on actually community projects around COVID-19, giving people a chance to share their projects if people wanted to join. The main one that I've been involved with since, and I spent a fair bit of time last week on, was the offline #2 on.com, which has really taken off. It's got over 1,000 e-commerce developers volunteering time to help small businesses now. Still, it's only a week old. There's still a lot to get organized there, but I think it's got a lot of promise there. Some other resources that are around, I've got a personal blog. It's called alankent.me. That's ALANKENT.me. I'm just sharing little tweets or other blogs I see on tips for small business. I will share some of my own as well, but if you're interested in tips for helping small business, feel free to sort of follow along, and there's particular channels on that one. One thing that I did want to point out in particular, and we'll get into the main topic in a moment, but there's if you're talking to small businesses, one thing that can really help is to, a lot of small businesses registered on Google My Business, and Google My Business is a great way to register your business hours and location on the map. Now, location doesn't matter very much at the moment, but your opening hours. A lot of people have not been updating their opening hours, and so it makes it more painful for the customers. So if you wanted one tip, if you're talking to anybody, point them at the Google My Business app. I ordered some takeout, which I can pick up and collect, which I did the other day, and they hadn't updated their office hours. They didn't even know there was an app. And so they said, oh, we went through the website. It was just too confusing for me. And then so I pulled out the app and I just showed it to them and said, oh, I could do that. The only problem was they had to remove the username and password to log into the app. Nothing's perfect, but it was very easy then to update their hours through the app. It was just all simple GUI. And so if you're out, or if you're talking to any businesses, you might suggest that if they update the app, even if it's like a takeout business. Now, obviously, if it's a walk-in, well, a lot of places you can't do that anymore, but it's still worthwhile to update the site so that people know that you're changed hours. Cool. Cheney, is there anything that you'd like to insert at the beginning before we get into the main topic?
No, let's kind of dive into it. I think that's good. Just we're open to questions. I know it's a small group here, but please, because it's a small group, just please chime in, help steer this whichever way. Both Alan and I are generalists in this field, so your questions will help us figure out what's good content for this call.
So does anybody on the call, you don't have to, but do you have any questions around, in particular, either Google technologies related to e-commerce, or otherwise, we've got somebody else wanting to join, either Google technologies or general web technologies. So I can't comment, if you want advice on Magento versus Shopify, this is not the place for that. I'm not going to give those sorts of advice. This is more Google technologies we could talk about, or general web technologies. Do you have any questions first? Nope. Then I'm actually going to try and make this a little bit more interactive for you guys, if you don't mind, because it can be very boring just listening to us talk. Now, I can't force it on you, but I'm just wondering, how many Google technologies can people come up with? And Cheney, I'll test you out in a moment later on. We'll use you as a backup. Yeah, let's make it a little bit more painful. But what Google technologies do you know of that are relevant to e-commerce, and particularly for developers? Anybody willing to jump in and get off mute and make a suggestion?
Feel free to use chat too.
As in analytics, or as in
Google Analytics is a good one.
Microdata. There's the.
So what is microdata?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, the line was breaking up there. Could you expand on microdata a little bit? Could you expand on that one?
Oh, the extent to which you incorporate schema.org to identify your products, your organization, your store, your whatever, to make it more easy to process, I think, for the crawler in the end, and to create rich snippets that increase the attention your ranking gets.
Yes, and you may not have realized, but schema.org just posted a new schema. I think it's version 7 of the schema recently, and it included some changes to help with COVID. Some more status codes and so forth went into schema.org.
Notice the event update, where you can say it's an online event and it has a virtual location. That's really awesome, because I have a number of event websites and they are all migrating to online, so that's good.
Cool. Yep, there's 2. For analytics, just going back to those ones, did you know, I assume you know about the e-commerce extension for Google Analytics?
Yeah, and use a lot of Tag Manager, use a lot of Google Optimize. Let's see, now I have to open my Google account to see what I'm using. A lot of Data Studio. Let me see, I think, yeah, Google My Drive or Google Drive, whatever. Forms. Sheets, yeah, that's all in Drive. Yeah, that's it for now, I think.
Cool. Marius, did you want to try and jump in with some of the gaps?
Was that to me, Alan?
No, I was just noticed that Marius was on the call. I was trying to tempt him into saying something. But no harm, no pressure. Okay, do you want to try and do some off the top of your head, Cheney?
Yeah. So I think you mentioned some great ones around kind of acquisition and kind of management and knowing what's going on your site. I think some of the other ones around transactions. So Google Pay, I think it's a one where Google's offering cards that are on file for people with Google accounts and helping you streamline that payment. Google sign-in and identity is definitely another one to kind of help connect the dots, to help know your users. Fill in address information, those kind of things. For those who don't want to use Google Identity, just structuring your website. So you're leveraging Chrome's kind of autofill function so that the browser can use a one-time address and name entry and kind of place it in various different e-commerce sites. That's usually very good at kind of decreasing friction and increasing conversion rates. I think less obvious ones, Alan might have already mentioned things like Google My Business to help you manage your storefront. But also things like the Merchant Center, which allows you to connect your product feed to Google. So across various different Google surfaces and search, which may represent e-commerce in different ways, we can use that kind of metadata in various forms. And and I think what's kind of emerging, what we're seeing, maybe just throw something that's a bit more far field out there, would be, in India, we're inside the Google Pay umbrella, we're testing something called the Spot platform, which is a way for you to kind of bring merchant storefronts into the payments app itself to try to kind of like further reduce that discovery and then purchase kind of model. There's a ton more stuff probably, but maybe I'll stop there. And then Alan, if you guys want to throw in any of
I must admit that the Google Spot platform is one of my personal favorites. I know it's only in India so far, and it's possibly a little different now because I really liked it because it helped with the offline to online transition. You could go into a store, you could scan a QR code, it would take you directly to an online experience. You could get more information about the product, you could order it, there was lots of things that it actually solved for, and it would have proximity information. So if you walked into a store and you open up the Google Pay app, the most likely site at the top of your list would be the store that you're in, because it's got geographic fencing and so forth built in, and so it knows where you are if you've granted it permission to use your location. And so using that information, it can bring up what they call spots, business spots, at the top of the list. And so it's quite easy to find the business online and then return to it later. We'll see how well it goes in India. It's still, I'd say, in the experimental phase, the early sort of phase, but it's one that had a lot of potential to me. Now, it's a little bit lower priority to me right now because who needs the offline to online right now, because nobody's actually going to visit the stores, unfortunately. But the other thing that I found quite interesting about it is it's got the web browser. Effectively, it's got a web browser, a web view built into the native app, and it also does payments. And so to me, it's also an interesting experience to sort of say, what would an experience be like if once a person came to your website, they were already logged on, guaranteed, with an identity you knew of, and your payments is integrated. So payments is a one tap to complete a purchase. And so from that point of view, it was quite interesting to me to see, as an experiment, to see, hey, should we be trying to get this into web browsers? I'm of the opinion, yes, but there's nothing like actually trying it out to work out, is it too much of a security concern and people's experiences there?
Yeah, let me know if you agree, Alan. So it sounds like a lot of the products we just kind of listed has like two major themes. So the theme number one is reducing friction, which is, as time passes, the amount of retailers, people who sell things and do commerce on the web increases. And so how do we decrease friction at the long tail? So things like identity and payment information, or even bringing that into the Google Pay app. Really, it sounds like it's all about making sure the consumer already has their data ready when they do intend to purchase. And then the second kind of theme to me is that, like, how can we make commercial content a little bit more distributed, such that you're not marrying your presentation with your products and your content. You're kind of separating the two, right? And that sounds like a lot of what the Merchant Center, the Spot platform, about bringing your products into the payments app. And the idea is, like, can you increase reach and also decrease friction to purchase? That's a major theme that I see, and I think I find it exciting because if you're a small shop and you're trying to compete with, say, the Amazon of the world, right? You don't compete guest experience versus guest experience where everyone has a big form to fill out. You're competing against someone who is already logged in with stuff and saved with an incumbent. And so I like a lot of these payment products and things like that, because it's helping the small player essentially catch up to a login experience elsewhere.
Cool. Okay, so some other topics. One we didn't actually mention explicitly is Google Search Console. Google Search Console actually, I think, is quite important for e-commerce sites. One is because you can find out information about search, but it's turning into more of a hub as a way to reach out to sites. So if we find something wrong on a site, rather than requiring you to log on to 20 different dashboards and consoles, Google Search Console is somewhat growing into be that one notification channel. And so they're using it for other streams of notifications, not just strictly search. So it is something to not forget about, is the Google Search Console, to make sure you've got that hooked up, and get into the habit of checking it out to see what messages there are. There is this other minor product, it might have got mentioned along the way, but there's Google Ads, as slightly important to Google, I should say, but just to help directing traffic to your site. And there's really two forms of ads from my point of view. You've got the generic, here is some information I want to share. It could be a blog post. There's so many different ad formats that I'm not really going to try and pretend to cover them all. That would definitely be an episode, probably a whole series just to talk about ads. But there is products like Google AdSense, which helps you tune, so you can give it a budget and it tries to do its best job to automatically work out an ad program for your products. And so you can reduce the amount of effort you have to do, and it will try and spend your money for the most optimal way. So if you don't want to have much overhead, you can just use it. Another aspect is things like page speed insights to test the performance of your site. Is your site going to be highly efficient? There are a number of results showing speed improves revenue conversion. So trying to use that, using those sorts of tools to check it out your site. And what I hear, and I got a lot of feedback on, is a lot of people like to also check out the performance of their competitor sites so that they know where they are relative to their competitors. It seems to be quite common that people don't care about exactly what their performance is. They care more about what their performance is compared to their competitors, because if they're worse, they want to know about it, because they're most likely going to be losing traffic to their competitors. The reality is not everybody can compete with Amazon and eBay. And so having competitors in your own space feels more achievable. I'm not sure I 100% agree with that. I think you actually should be competing, like doing your best to be aware of where the big players are as well, because they are also your competitor. And there may be things that you can do with a smaller scope that they can't do because they've got such a broad scope. I'm glad Google Optimize came up in there. I do think that's an important one. What else is there? One I mentioned last week was using YouTube for live streaming. Why not live stream your products? You can actually, there are some limited ability to sell. I think it's Teespring. There's an integration with Teespring, and there are a few integrations. So you can actually put some simple merchandising on your YouTube channel. I think that'll be an interesting one to see if it goes further. But what some people have been doing is using YouTube to live stream product information, put a phone number on the screen, just take an order over the phone, do home delivery. It's a very easy way to get up and going without actually having an e-commerce store. I might just pause here. Any questions on any of this from any of the audience? Otherwise, I have a tendency just to keep waffling on. If you guys have any questions, feel free also to drop them in chat anytime. We're keeping an eye on the chat window there. Otherwise, we're going to keep going just to share a bit more. Okay, I wrote up a list, and we'll see how much Cheney can remember, because I actually shared this list with him briefly before. He probably hasn't read it, but Google Merchant Center. Do you know how many products Google Merchant Center links off to? It falls underneath that umbrella.
Ooh, that's a...
Because I wrote it down because I usually forget.
Yeah, I would just be pulling a number out of thin air on this one.
Yeah. Well, Google Merchant Center, when I first joined Google, from the other side of the table, it's sort of like, I was previously at Magento, it's sort of like, hey, there's 20 different product teams. Oh, and I forgot PWA. I didn't even get some of the cool web technologies in here. So PWA should definitely be added to that list. Not to do with Google Merchant Center, but just as a direction. The Google Merchant Center has got, I was worried when I first joined Google, have we got 20 different ways to upload product information to all the different Google teams? And I was really happy to see the answer is no. That Google Merchant Center, even though it just came out of one team, it has become the centralized place for all sorts of information. So the very first one that comes up, for example, if you've got your normal sorts of ads, where they're fairly generic, and then you've got product ads. And the more Google knows about the thing you're advertising, the better quality experience it can get. Like search results you all know, you do a Google search, they're not simply a list of products anymore. It's not just a list of blue links. There are different experiences that are shown. And so if it knows its products, or it knows its recipes, or the more it knows about it, it often creates a different experience for them. And so if you're searching for shopping coffee machine price or coffee machine deals, there's often something it can infer that maybe you're trying to do a shopping expedition at the moment. And so it'll show you a whole series of images alongside each other with a little bit like with star ratings and pricing and so forth. And so by knowing that it's a product, Google is able to do more with it. Now, we got the mention of structured data before, the microdata. You can inject directly into the page and the crawler will crawl it. But you're at the mercy somewhat of the Googlebot. I may be skating on thin ice here, so take this with a little bit of grain of salt or a big lump of salt or whatever. But if you want to update it more rapidly, having feeds, it actually feeds the data in about those products, and we can update information like, oh, it just went out of stock, let's try and take it out of the index. And so you can get, there's a number of feeds you can supply to Google, and you can get that information to Google a little bit faster about products to reflect directly in the ads. So it doesn't have to wait for the next Googlebot crawl. You can be more proactive about informing Google of changes to products. That's one of the advantages of the Google Merchant Center. But there's also different sorts of ads. For example, there's local inventory ads. And local inventory ads hooks into more like the Maps platform. And so if you do things like, I want a Chinese restaurant. Now, if you say near me, it makes it really obvious. But even if you don't, if you look for a restaurant, most of the time you're going to be wanting to find something near yourself. And so the more it knows about the locality of things, this is where Google My Business comes in. It's a way of telling this the location of your physical stores. Or if you're advertising products like backpacks, if you actually tell Google through Merchant Center where the backpacks are, it can know where to find them, and so it can start doing local searches.
Yeah, there's an interesting, I guess, UX piece here where I find a lot of poor usage of this feature, where people would have the local inventory. So if you set it properly, and it's true, that product is nearby, but once you click through, is the site actually equipped to show to the user that this product is actually near them? And so it's that kind of last mile piece I would also kind of call out to, which is, okay, someone clicked on it knowing that it was a local inventory, it was at some store near them. Can you finish the link and show in your web UI saying, this is my location of where you could find this? That's where a lot of people, from large brands to small brands, potentially all drop the ball. So I'll just put a quick call out there.
Cool. Another one that was fairly recent was Google Merchant Center is also starting to feed some data into organic search. And so even organic search, even if you don't use the paid ads, it is useful. We can draw upon that as a source of information for organic search results to get more timely information about products. And the other one, of course, is shopping actions. So there's Google Shopping. There was formerly, it may even still exist, like Google Express. Mm-hmm. And so you can actually buy things through Google surfaces. And again, we get the product information through the Google feeds. Related to that, there's also orders APIs that comes underneath the Google Merchant Center umbrella. And so that gives you the way of receiving orders. If something gets purchased through the Google surface, there's APIs to actually fetch those order information. Other sorts of things. Do you know of any other ones? Can you remember anything? And because I've got a couple left on the list.
Not tied to merchant kind of ad specifically. I mean, I think I'll just reiterate the point that we're trying to do a good job of making the Merchant Center kind of the one-stop shop of Google kind of understanding your commerce metadata, and so that next to your openly crawled stuff around your structured data piece is hopefully something we can build everything around. I will say that if we move a little bit out of Merchant Center, you can even things like a Google Assistant ultimately is trying to feed back into kind of the Merchant data center kind of data, and you can tell the Google Assistant to search for shoes on eBay, and it actually deep links you directly to a pre-filled search results page on that e-commerce site. right? And so that's stuff where we can do without much meta information, but when you combine that with Merchant Center, then that potentially creates further connections down the line.
Cool. Another one that I think is a little bit less well known is reviews, ratings and reviews. So Google has a seller ratings and a product ratings capability, and it's also got a reviews capability. So the ratings, if you can provide ratings information, Google often shows rating information. And now the information that we show is drawn from multiple sources. The merchants can provide information. We also have a number of rating agencies that we get, like, so if we're doing like a product rating, we'll draw information from multiple sources to bring it up online. I don't know the exact algorithm. I probably couldn't share it if I did, to be completely honest. But you can get information on your own site. There is tools to actually show a little badge to sort of show what the ratings is. And that can be your own information, like your own customers feeding it. But that data can also then feed into the greater Google indexes. And so when you bring it up, you know what your customers think of a product. You can also show that on your own site, and it can add to the trust level when they're looking at a product to understand this is a product that lots of other customers do, and it's been verified somewhat by Google. So I've got a greater trust than just if the company is claiming a rating for a particular product. There is also product ratings, where, and tied to that is that there is the ability to do reviews. So for example, you can hook in a review on your checkout page after the person has completed the purchase. What you can do is provide a link to say, great, would you like to participate in a survey of what your experience was? If they agree to it, it'll also follow up later from memory, where they'll actually ask to sort of say, okay, you did it at checkout, but it's been a few weeks. Have you actually received the product? Was it really good? And so it's a way of building in reviews into your own site. So you can actually go off and collect, and it will do the machinery to send a review request off to collect that data and make it available to you.
Alan, do you want to quickly cover, and you talked about product reviews, seller reviews, and all these different things. So where on Google would I find this stuff?
Well, the best way I normally go to find it is by doing a Google search. But there is like developers.google.com, but there's so much information around, which is a bit of feedback we got from the community. I interviewed a number of agencies trying to work out, well, what's the problems with Google for using it for e-commerce sites by developers? And one of the feedbacks was there's so much information out there,
yeah,
that it's hard to keep track of. And that's one of the reasons for doing this series, to kicking it off. We'll do a better job of advertising it a bit earlier rather than just 10 minutes before the call. That's my bad. But the information that we want to share is about how to actually use these products on your own site. That's where I'd like to get to and be able to answer some of the questions by bringing in experts on the particular topic areas. But I actually just start, the biggest problem I have is knowing the product names. And that's why I wanted to do this overview one. Hopefully there's been some product names that have come up that people might not have been familiar with. And then you just basically Google search to find the information. It's normally on the help portal. The URLs are not particularly pretty. They might just look like a number. That's fine. It's just saying page number 27915. That's still the right sort of page if it's on the Google Help Center. But a lot of those ones that I just listed there were all underneath Google Merchant Center under that family of products. So the seller ratings, the product ratings, even though they're not directly to product information you upload, well, you can upload your ratings information. Again, that's through Merchant Center. You can upload and download order information. You can there's a whole lot of information that's all done through Google Merchant Center. So if you're using an extension and it claims to have integration with Google Merchant Center, the reality is you need to check what breadth it's got. It may be only feeding up enough information for product ads and not feeding up local inventory data. So there is many different streams for different purposes, and you need to think about which ones you want to do. I'm not saying everybody should jump on Google Shopping Actions. That team might disagree, but I think that makes sense for some people to be in the Google Shopping experiences. Other ones just want to use it for ads, or you just want to make sure your information is more timely updated in organic search if you don't want to pay for ads. So there's a number of reasons to get that data uploaded. if a pause there. Any questions from the audience again? Well, I've got a question for you guys, if you don't mind. How many products here had you not heard of before?
I think I knew most. I think it's the number of the pay options that I wasn't aware of, but the other ones I just forgot to mention myself, like the Search Console, or well, you mentioned Google My Business. I think most of those I actually frequently use, but it's the integrating payment or identity or things like that we as a company don't do. And we use Google Ads, and we have a channelable feed into it that frequently updates and includes all the schema data as well. So for me, I think I knew most, except for the really technical ones, and when it comes to privacy sensitive tools.
Cool. There wasn't actually, I was just trying to, changing topics slightly for a little bit. There was an interesting blog post. Oh, I need to be careful now. I've got to find it publicly because I don't know if I just reviewed a pre-release draft of it. So that's always a risk when you know about things internally. If it's not public yet, I shouldn't be talking about it. Cheney, any ones for you? And I'm going to desperately go off into a
slight topic change here. So a lot of things you mentioned, if a normal search result page might seem overwhelming, there is a shopping dedicated part of Google for those who don't use it that often. You can go to shopping.google.com, google.com/shopping, or when you do a normal search, just clicking that shopping tab up top. That takes you to a dedicated place where you can kind of see where all these different data streams from Merchant Center kind of feeds into, right? And so you can see, if you go to google.com/shop and click on an item, that's where you can see kind of like an item page, essentially, on a Google surface with the reviews, with things like the product listing ads, with buy on Google, where you can kind of send sell your products directly through Google. And then my Google Assistant started to jump off there. And so those are interesting places to see how kind of that data and the reviews are actually surfaced. Where it's really interesting for those who kind of want to invest in their own site experiences is, what is this trying to do? Like, this is trying to reduce friction. If you have your products on Google surface, to identity and payments is generally already built in, right? And so it becomes a great comparison as to, well, what are the potential gaps between your own site and what's shown up here? Because what Google Shopping does well is that you can streamline, that kind of meta information, but it doesn't maybe not do a great job of brand experience of showing why this product is different than other places that you might be able to purchase it. That's what your own website does really well. So I like to use it, and when I work with other developers, to say, okay, what does this site actually do well? What can you bring in terms of reducing friction over to your own site using things like the Google Identity, the payment services, and all those different things, so you can kind of mold that experience.
Cool. Well, I did find thank you for that. I did find a blog post I was after, and I just dropped it in the chat, but it's on the webmasters.googleblog.com site. It's the top one at the moment, but it talks about how to pause your business online. And so one of the questions that we've got from some merchants is, well, I've closed my store at the moment, but I'm planning to come back. How can I do that without tanking my search results when I come back? And so there is a blog out there now that goes through from John Mueller and others, I believe. I should actually just check it, who wrote it. But what it does is it tells you, it might not actually have an author written on it, but what it does is it tells you the right ways to take your business offline so that you can bring it back online later without penalizing yourself too badly. And so there are different techniques, and it goes through a number of these techniques with different levels of recommendations. But if you do it the wrong way, it can end up with basically it can take longer to get back online and can cause problems. I don't know if it's actually one of them, but I could well imagine that like you've got issues like fraud and so forth, and so there's particular patterns that don't look good. I'm not sure that is strictly a reason, but there's good ways basically to take your site offline, and if you follow those practices, then when you want to get back online, it'll be more efficient. An example of not wanting to be online, you're completely out of stock, you've got nothing, your store's closed, you do everything from your store, you're not allowed to even go to your store. Let's just close the store down completely. I don't really want any traffic at the moment. Now, my recommendation, and the recommendation on the blog as well, is to say, no, leave all your product information up there as long as possible. What you really want to do is just not accept orders. And so block it at the, like, more like the add to cart, to sort of say, I'm sorry, our store is closed at the moment. I think that is a better way, but it depends on your platform. It depends on what you're actually able to do. So that blog post, which I shared, which is on webmasters.googleblog.com, it's currently the top one there, is just talking about how to pause your business online so that you can bring it back later with the least impact to your search rankings.
And he brought a great point, especially given the current kind of COVID-19 circumstances, where I was having a conversation with a particular merchant recently around, they have a ton of web traffic, but because they're seeing a spike in traffic to out of inventory pages, there's a lot more focus on controlling the customer experience of what happens when something isn't in stock, right? The sledgehammer solution there is to just take it off because you don't want people to have a bad experience. But other types of bad experiences is being able to add to cart. You have already committed resources to managing it that way, and then discovering much later in the funnel that something is broken, it doesn't ship to you, all those different things. You want to avoid that. But the balance is, how do you still have an online presence while avoiding the actual poor parts of that journey? Right. And so I think that's really relevant in these times.
I was on a popular marketplace looking for toilet paper, which is rather hard to get in our local supermarket. And it was coming up with products. And I said, great. And one of them even said in stock on the listing. And I clicked through and it said it's available from multiple sellers. And I clicked through and not a single one of them had it. And so as a user, it felt terrible. So like, you just wasted my time. You told me that it was available. These other ones said they weren't available. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. The UX, if you don't want to frustrate your customers, don't waste their time. Tell them, if you can tell them early on in the flow, and it's just unfortunate with no complaint about this particular company in terms of being out of stock. Hey, they can't control it. But for your user experience, the earlier you can tell them in the pipeline and in the flow through the site, I think you'll end up with happier customers.
And it's funny because usually in web e-commerce, we almost over-index on the reach, distribution, right? Just be everywhere. But we're increasingly discovering that it's not just about being everywhere. It's being everywhere with a good experience. And sometimes being everywhere with a bad experience for a large percentage of that is a potential net a negative, right? And so we're kind of discovering that. And so I encourage everyone to kind of think about where reach might actually be bad reach.
Interesting. In terms of one thing that I'd really appreciate, I know there's not many people on the call, but one thing I'd really appreciate from those willing to share is which Google products you would have the most questions on. Because what I want to do is start for inviting more people along to this call, specialists on particular products. And it helped me. I've got my own list of what I think. I asked it on Twitter. Google Merchant Center came up as a reasonably high priority to understand the complexity there. And it was important to getting product information up. And I think it's also particularly important for developers because they have to actually interface with many of the feeds and what's the right way to do it and how to use the status codes and so forth. But I'd be interested in, out of the different products we've talked about, even if you don't plan to join in the future, it'd still be interesting to me that if you've used some of these products, where do you think it would help you the most if you could talk to an expert and actually ask some questions from an expert?
I think I'll jump in again.
Thank you.
So at least what I've found most challenging recently is Tag Manager, because there's just a billion ways and a billion settings to apply. And even though in the end there's plenty of blogs out there to help you figure it out, but I think some best practices on how to set up Tag Manager, how to, even for Google Analytics, how to group products in an efficient way so that you can more easily analyze the data afterwards. How to optimize, well, there's the Google My Business. How would I generate most traffic to that, if that is even the intent of Google My Business online? So do I post products, or do I post offerings, or do I post blogs? Which of those are actually most engaging to users and lead to a positive business outcome?
On the last one, the Google My Business, that one I can answer immediately, but the other ones are great. But the Google My Business I see as really for small business. It is also for large business if you want to tell Google about the locations of your stores and their opening hours. And so that goes through that Google My Business feed. But when you're talking about blogs on Google My Business, well, Google My Business has got the ability to create your own website for your own business.
Right.
But it's really intended that if you just want something quick and easy, it gets you a way of getting online. It's not a replacement for a full-blown CMS or e-commerce platform, and it's not really intended to be. So
right.
If you're a serious e-commerce professional, I'm going to guess you're going to be more interested in using an e-commerce platform with all of the capabilities, would be my guess.
Right. So we have a fairly large platform on Magento, and we have, I think now, 20-something stores. And what we've recently started doing is improving all the content on Google My Business. So in terms of the description that we use for our business, improve the pictures of the various stores, and also push offerings through it. So not so much products themselves, but discount sales, etc. And that's why I was wondering, because I don't necessarily see a lot of traffic coming from it, but because we have an omni-channel strategy, it could still work. We haven't determined yet whether the impact is positive there.
Do you have your own website as well? Yeah. So if you've got your own website, Cheney, jump in if you know anything different. And I'm not claiming to be a Google My Business expert, but I'm not really surprised you're not getting much traffic. I think it'd be your main domain name would be the real source of that traffic. What it's more useful for is because you've told it, Google now knows your opening hours for your stores. It knows the physical locations of your stores. That is the primary data. Beyond that, I don't think Google My Business is intended. As the more sophisticated you get, I think you basically stop using it. You wouldn't use it for your own website. Now, I could be wrong in saying that, and maybe we should be getting an expert in on a future call to clarify that. But if you've got your own website, I'd just put it on your own website myself.
What we did notice is that if you put UTM parameters in the URLs that you save in Google My Business, in the end, the Search Console also indexes or sees those as separate URLs. So you're able to see the amount of times they're viewed, their ranking, the keywords they're being shown for, etc. So that's a neat trick to have an idea of, okay, how many times do people actually see these things?
Okay, cool.
Cheney,
did you want to add anything to what I just said?
No, I might go back to the kind of Google Tag Manager and GA piece. I think those, that's a great topic. I highly recommend us having a session on that in the future, just I know that these two are designed for small businesses are all the way to really, really large business. And then, as you probably know since you use it, they're very general tools, and it's very easy to get off the well-lit path because it's trying to solve for so many edge cases that people face, right? And yeah, so completely agree, and I sympathize with that kind of complexity there. And then in terms of GA, also being able to kind of link that to an earlier mentioned product, Data Studio, which I think is a very powerful way of using GA data, especially if you wanted to link GA data with your own kind of commercial data stored somewhere else. Data Studio is a great place to kind of merge some of those things and maybe have a better representation, as opposed to trying to figure out the right segmentation and recreating reports in GA, which requires a lot of custom upfront setup.
Cool, thank you. Well, we're getting towards the end of the time, so I appreciate your feedback. Hey, does anybody else want to share any of their particular interests or things that you'd like to learn more about, like topics that we should raise the priority on for future calls?
I'll throw something out there from what I personally would like to see. I know, this particular chat was about kind of Google products. It'll be great to kind of map this from the other side too, in a separate call, from top use cases. What are the biggest, gaps in terms of e-commerce from a use case standpoint? And maybe we can map it back towards some solutions we might offer. And or if we don't have a particular solution, what we even see in the marketplace.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, if there are no more questions, I'll just open it up one last time. If anybody's got any questions about anything Google related, happy to have a shot at answering it, or not answering it because we don't know. But feel free to ask any other questions. Otherwise, I'll wrap up this call. Any last chance for questions? Well, I'll take that as a no. Thank you all for joining. We are going to be running this over a number of weeks. The plan is weekly. We're going to start introducing, inviting some more experts on particular areas. I haven't decided which will be the first one yet. We're going to take that off and have a chat about that offline, but we'll certainly try and advertise that in advance so people know to come along and ask questions in a particular area. But I just wanted to thank you all for attending. Thank you, Cheney, for supporting. Always a pleasure having you on.
Have fun.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.